Greetings to all the viewers. My name is Piyush Chaudhary, Assistant Professor at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. I welcome you all to this new lecture today on the short story The Courter by the critically acclaimed and award-winning short story writer Salman Rushdie. So it will be a two-part lecture. In the first part, I'll give a brief introduction to the story The Courter, and also we'll discuss a detailed summary of the entire story to make it easy for the viewers to understand. And also interspersed within this summary will be several critically important points, certain critical important points that the author raises in this short story. With this, I will go on with the introduction of the story, and as you can see, I'll begin with the introduction to The Courter. The Courter is basically set in 1962, and it covers the story of a teenage narrator who is living in London with his family, and there is a hall porter there, a man who does, who cleans the apartments, and his name is Messire. Now, Messire encounters Mary, a 60-year-old Indian lady who works as a household domestic help in the house of the narrator of the story. So, the major part of this entire story, The Courter, revolves around their relationship with each other and also their relationship with the narrator. So, due to his mixed identity, Messire's mixed identity, he comes from an obscure East European roots. He is known as mixed up porter, right? Because his identity seems to be very mixed up. And due to his habit of always speaking, and due to her habit of always speaking certainly again and again with every other sentence, the 60-year-old woman, the household ayah, the maid, is known as certainly Mary. Right? So, this man, mixed up porter, he is a former grand chess master and a champion chess player, but now he is working as a hall porter in the apartment building. And the narrator is never named in this story. However, his other family members are named. He has 3 sisters, right? So, and his father and his mother, right? So, there are several other themes that this short story touches on, and it's basically the discrimination in the lives of the immigrants by the local British population. The story also touches on the struggles of language that these immigrants face and how they deal with being an Asian in a foreign country in the 1960s timeline. So, the story also brings in Rushdie's idea of, you can say, chutneyfication, his idea of hybridity, and also Bhabha's idea of newness. We'll discuss all of this in the subsequent lectures. So, this was a basic, introduction to this entire story. Now, this story, The Courter, it comes from the collection which is known as East-West. So, therefore, as the name itself suggests, The Courter touches on ideas of both the East and the West. So, we'll come back to the importance of the title, in the second part of the lecture. So, just the story now. The Courter is basically divided into 11 sections, and section by section I will be going into a detailed summary, and I will urge the students to also read the story apart from the summary that I am giving. So, let me now go to the first section. This is section number 1. Now, the story opens with a conversation between certainly Mary and mixed up porter. The unnamed narrator of the story informs us that Mary is the household maid of the narrator and mixed up is the porter who works in their apartment. So, they open their their discussion on the ancient city of Banaras and the dead bodies which are burnt at the Manikarnika Ghats, right. So, this woman is known as certainly Mary because of her repeating habit of always speaking in terms of certainly yes, or she used to say certainly no, she used to say certainly not, certainly this, certainly that, and so on and so forth. That's why she is known as certainly Mary. And on the other hand, this man mixed up porter, right, we know that he has suffered a stroke, and we are also told in the first section that this man is attracted towards this woman certainly Mary, and one of the major reasons why he falls in love with this woman is because of a speech impairment wherein certainly Mary is not able to pronounce the consonant C, right. So, instead she mispronounces it, so she always pronounces it as C. So, she cannot pronounce P basically. So, due to this, she used to call this man not as a porter but rather as a courter, and when she used to call him courter, he started falling in love with her, because courter basically means a man who is courting or dating a woman basically to marry her, basically it's like a lover. Courter means a lover, right. So, due to this inadvertent and unnoticeable error on her part, she mistakenly calls her a courter, and this man likes it. And very soon he starts believing, that he is in fact courting her. And that is the end of section 1, and he proclaims that he will try to be a courter in her eyes. Next up is section 2. So section 2 opens with the description of how this Aya, certainly Mary, how she has contributed a lot to the narrator's family, to raise his family. And in section 2 we are also informed that this woman, several years later she left England and she went back to India. She wrote a letter to the narrator asking for some money. The narrator sends the money, and and then her niece Stella writes a letter thanking back the narrator for sending the money, right? And we get to know that Mary is now almost 90 years old and she is doing physically fine. So towards the end of section 2, the narrator believes that he has done very little for certainly Mary, who has served as his domestic servant all these years. He feels guilty about it, and then therefore he decides that he will write the story, of Mixed Up Porter and certainly Mary, right? So therefore section 2 is sort of a preface. It's sort of a preface by the narrator where he describes his aim in writing this story. The main aim in writing the story is to tell the story of the couple, and the narrator says that it's not just the couple's story but also his and his family's story as well, right? So look at these lines which I'll be showing you on the screen to understand the purpose of writing. Of course, it also made me feel guilty about having done so little for Mary over the years. For whatever reason, it has become more important than ever to set down the story I have been carrying around unwritten for so long. The story of Aya and the gentleman whom she renamed with unintentional but prophetic overtones of romance, the courter. I see now that it is not just their story but ours, mine as well. So therefore, this particular section is sort of a preface by the narrator. It also in a way hints that the story will be about these two people, right? And that is certainly Mary and Mixed Up Porter. But how is this story his own story as well? This is because what happens to the porter and certainly Mary at the end is something that troubles the entire family of the narrator as well. When I come to the second section, I'll give more clarity on this. Let me now go on to the third section. This is section 3. So we are told that the porter's real name was Messir or Mishirish, right? Yes, that's what his name was. So we are informed that he belongs to the East European communist roots, and who now works as a hall porter in the apartment, and he does the usual jobs of a porter, which includes cleaning, transporting items and other menial jobs, right? So the narrator, along with his sister Duri, discusses the prospects of naming Misir or Mishirish, right? And they go on very funny and absurd theories on what they could name him. The narrator then gives him certain other weird sounding names from science fiction characters, and ultimately they finally decide to call him as Mixed Up. By this name they are hinting at his mixed up identity, right? Then we are also told that this man, Mixed Up Porter, he's an easygoing man in nature, and he's well aware of the various names that he is referred to in the apartment, but he has no issues with it. Therefore it also hints at the discrimination that he receives at the hands of the English community, right? So towards the end of section 3, he tells the narrator that they can call whatever they want to. So he comes across as a docile man, right? So here section 3 ends. Let me now go on to section number 4. So section 4 opens in the past, in the summer of 1962, while the narrator was in his school during his vacations. So the narrator then enumerates, he describes his various sisters. He has 3 sisters. The youngest one is known as Scheherazade, and who was 1 year old. Then you have Muniza, who was 10-year-old, and then he has already introduced Duri, who was 14 years old. He is the 4th sibling, and his name is not given to us in the story. The narrator then describes in this section that they live in an apartment in London where several other families of Indian origin also live, right? And one Maharaja of B, that's his name, and then also the Prince of P, that's his name, his son, right? The Maharaja's son, they also live there. Then the narrator describes the innocent and playful manner in which his sisters and he also used to tease certainly Mary by saying that she loves Mixed Up Porter. So basically in this section the narrator is just describing the various childhood activities and playful events from his life. He also describes his highly abusive, aggressive and patriarchal father, who never discussed any decision with the family members. He was a patriarch. Then we are told that he has rented 2 flats, one flat singularly for himself and the other flat for the mother, the 3 sisters, the narrator and certainly Mary, right, the Aya. We are then also informed that he is an alcoholic, so evidently the household environment of the narrator, it was not very comfortable. Then after a few months, his father took a 3-bedroom apartment in a rich posh area, where other Indians also lived, and once again the Indian Maharaja also lived there. His name was Maharaja of B, and his son the sporting prince of P. That's how they are referred to. Then one day his father was slapped. The narrator's father was slapped by an English woman at the pharmacy due to a funny conversation, which was result of a confusion arising due to his broken English, right, or culturally different English, I would say. Not broken, but I would say due to certain confusion related to certain words which are used differently in England and differently in the East. So his father got slapped by the woman who was thinking that he was molesting her by using an inappropriate word. Right. So the entire family, including all the children, they laughed a lot at this, and once in a while the narrator used to go to look at the woman who had the audacity and the strength to slap his father. So this incident occurred due to the English language and how the English as used by the Indians or the Eastern people are quite different from the ones used by the West, right, and who are natives of that language, of course. So section 4 ends here. Next up is section number 5. So then after some time, Mixed Up Porter, he comes to meet certainly Mary, and then he takes her for a sightseeing in the city, and basically they are both going on a date, and then they finally start meeting regularly. And then one day while going up the escalator, the woman, certainly Mary's sari got stuck in the elevator, and somehow Mixed Up Porter saved her honor by pushing the emergency stop button in right time. So thus the narrator takes a break from the story. Then he takes a break from the story of Mary and Mixed Up Porter, and he goes to his own love affair with Rosalia, who was a Polish girl, and she was also living in London. Then he also talks about Chandani, who is a distant cousin, and she represents both the Indian culture and the modern culture of Britain. So she was a classical dancer. She was training to learn Odissi and Bharatnatyam, but she is described as a young girl who dresses in tight black polo jeans and black polo neck t-shirts, right. So section 5 comes to an end here. Now the next is section number 6. So in section 6, we are told that both Mixed Up Porter and certainly Mary, they start meeting regularly, and it seems that they are both enjoying each other's company. Then we also get to know that there are certain protests going on against the immigrants. So in this section we get a sense that there is some sense of animosity against the immigrants, like the narrator and his family, and other people like the Maharaja of B and the Prince of P who live in the apartment, right. Then we are also described about the lascivious, the lustful, you can say the lewd, extravagant and lecherous life that the two men, the Prince of P and Maharaja of B, that they spend, that they live. So they often leave their wives and they indulge in sexual encounters with other women. They are extremely rich. They often indulge in adventurous encounters with the local English women, and the rich members of the nobility, they are basically rich members of the nobility who are indulged in adultery. And the narrator then offers a contrast of the life of lust between these two women with the life of platonic love of certainly Mary and Mixed Up Porter, right. So section 6 comes to an end with this, you can say this juxtaposition. Let me now take you to section number 7. So this section opens 1 year later in 1963, when the unnamed narrator goes to meet the Field Marshal Sir Charles Lutwidge Dodson. So he was retired army field marshal and was informally known as the Dodo. So he was basically supporting the narrator's application for British citizenship. He plays a game of chess with him, and the narrator wins the game. Later on he gets to know from the housekeeper that he should never have won because the Dodo will not like that, right, because he is a field marshal, he is a general, he has his own sense of ego and pride. Then she asks him to go and play another game and make sure that he loses, and this time he loses, but then he is never invited again to the home. So this was because of the Dodo's prideful nature, and he never invited him as he lost to him once. But despite that, the narrator is happy because he has received a new level of confidence at the chessboard after defeating the field marshal of the army. Then he arranges a game with Mixed Up Porter, and he firmly believes that he will be able to defeat Mixed Up Porter, but on the contrary, Mixed Up Porter gives him a crushing defeat. He is extremely shocked, goes for a second game and gets defeated even worse in the second game. So he is very humiliated, almost he is in tears. Then he even plays with Mixed Up Mary. Then he even plays with Certainly Mary, and he gets defeated even at her hands, right? And then he gets to know that this guy Messire was a popular chess player. He gets to know that he is the originator of the famous chess trick which is known as Nimzo Indian, right? It's a chess trick, and after this revelation he played with Mary and got humiliated at her hands as well, and he has to bite the dust, and here section 7 ends. Let me now take you to the next section, and that is section number 8. So section 8 opens with the narrator reading a book which describes the games about Messire. So he is in the books. So this guy, who was a former grand master, chess master, is now doing a menial job as a porter in a hall in an apartment in London, right? Such was the popularity of this man that his tricks found a place in traditional books of chess, right? Then the narrator describes a private game of chess, and how it becomes a private language for Certainly Mary and Mixed Up Porter, who taught her several tricks, and Certainly Mary, despite being 60 years old, was able to learn very fast, right? So basically in this section the narrator is describing the game of chess as an art of love, the game of chess which is the game of traditional warfare, as an art of love, right? So look at these lines. I will show you the lines to understand how the couple used to play chess. Chess had become their private language. Certainly Mary gained in skill, and she had learned with astonishing speed. When they played, he handicapped himself, he told her her best moves and demonstrated their consequences, drawing her step by step into the infinite possibilities of the game. Such was their courtship. In the game of chess, they had found a form of flirtation, an endless renewal that precluded the possibility of boredom, a courtly wonderland of the aging heart. So in this paragraph that we have just now read, we see how the couple has formed a kind of an intimate bond and an intimate language in the game of chess. The game of chess, a game of war, a game of tricks, you can say intelligence, duping the opponent, tricking the opponent. It's a warfare, but it has become a tender way of expressing their love for each other. So it is quite clear that the bond that they both share is not sexual in nature, because they are well past their prime, but rather it has become their private language, and the game of chess allows them to add up some masala to their lives, right? So the game of chess, as I mentioned, it allows them to spend their disoriented lives in a foreign land with some sense, with some orientation. They are now finally able to make sense of their position in a foreign land, right, with some association with each other. And how does this association come? This association comes by spending some time with each other, right? Then in this section, section 8, we are also told that the sister Duri and Muniza, they both contracted mumps disease, and he was not allowed to meet his sisters because mumps was a highly contagious disease. And then the narrator describes how his sister, how he used to play, and how she used to tease him, playfully tease him and taunt him about his failed love experience with the Polish girl Rosalia and and Chandani. So section 8 comes to an end with the author longing for a partner, and the unnamed narrator expresses that he is alone and that he wants a partner to call his own, right? Also living in London, he is facing some certain discriminatory attacks from his schoolmates, right? And therefore he is not able to be in tandem with the culture that he is living in, that is the English culture. It also shows his experience as an immigrant, and how he is spending a life of loneliness and disorientation, right? So let me now go on to the next section, and that is section number 9. So this section opens up with an incident with Mixed Up Porter. Some people came one day and they beat him up that night, and then after some time the Maharaja of B and the sporting prince of P, they both came and they asked him not to tell anyone where they were, and it appears that those thugs came to beat them, but instead assaulted the apartment porter Messire, right, that is the Mixed Up Porter. So these two guys came, and it appears that the prince of P had to pay some debts which he had to pay back and which he had clearly failed to do so. When the porter tells them that they are not there, then they started beating him up, and then again they leave. After this incident, after some time, 2 more people came, but the porter did not open the door, and they were both communicating from outside the door, right, from both sides of the door. They both remained outside only, and they were communicating through words. Messire tells them that they both have left on a flight to some other country, and in return of this help, the other day he was offered a few pounds, just 5 pounds, by the Maharaja of B and the Prince of P. So when the narrator comes to know, he says that he must call the police, but then they realize that this might not be a very good idea. Finally, they realize that whenever such a similar situation arises, it will be the porter who will handle it, and section 9 of the story ends here. Let's go now to section number 10. So section 10 begins with the narrator describing how the middle sister Muniza, she is now 11 years old, is now turning out to be a very aggressive girl. She gets bouts of anger and she cannot control her anger, much like her father. The narrator also describes the intentions and his ardent wish to get his British passport and British citizenship so that he can finally get away from his family. It's clear that the narrator has a disturbed life, family life, has a domestically, the domestic life is disturbed, and he wanted to go away from his patriarchal father. Then one day, the narrator's mother and certainly Mary, they both leave with the 2-year-old sister Shehrazadi to the local park. Suddenly 2 men came to ask them if anyone of them was the Maharaja of B's wife. So 2 men come to the park and then they threaten him. The 2 men believe that one of the women is the wife of the Maharaja of B. So the 2 women, that is certainly Mary and the narrator's mother, they both protest, but they don't listen and almost come to assault them, and they hurl lots of vulgar abuses on them. So then finally one of them took out a razor blade and they tried to sexually molest her. But just then Messire, the mixed up porter, he appears and he recognizes the voice from a few nights before. He recognizes that the voice of these 2 men were the same who spoke to them from outside the apartment door just a few nights before. Then he informed them that the wives of the Maharaja of B and the Prince of P can be found in the apartment above. Upon this, one of the men apologizes to the mother of the narrator, and finally they were about to leave, and then they attack Messire with the blade. So they strike the blade on his stomach and he bleeds, and then he falls unconscious, and section 10 of the story comes to an end here. Let me now take you to the next section, and that is, as you can see, this is section number 11. So by the beginning of Christmas, he recovers from this incident, and in between this time the narrator was in high school, and when he came back for his Christmas holidays, he came to know that the Maharaja of B and the Prince of P, those 2 men who were responsible for this attack, they both have left the apartment now. They are not living there anymore. However, after this incident, certainly Mary got very depressed. She started to look very pale. She even started having health issues, and then everything around the family was changing, and the main reason for the change in the entire household was basically it was the violent attack on Messire, as he was an immigrant, right? So Mary started having certain heart ailments. Then one day she realized that she wants to go home and that she is homesick. So therefore this shows the strong sense of belonging, you can say, the strong sense of belonging that and longing for her homeland that certainly Mary has, right? Then by you can say by mid-July of 1964, where the story is set in the 1960s in England. So by mid-July 1964, she leaves for Bombay, India, where she and once she reaches Bombay, she never has any heart ailment now, and we get to know that she is more than 90 years old. I think she is 91 years old. She is still healthy, she is doing well, she is walking fine, and she is doing good. And towards the end of section 11, the narrator also informs that his father has decided all of a sudden now to go to Karachi, Pakistan. The narrator also informed that he became a British citizen and he got his passport, and in 1964 finally he has got his passport, and the dodo helped him despite his defeat, right? So the narrator then says, and these are some of the most important lines in the entire story, the quarter, towards the end. He says that he had 2 ropes around his neck. One was pulling him towards the east and the other was pulling him towards the west, and at the end he says that he will not he will not choose any of the two. He will keep on struggling, keep on kicking, but he refuses to choose either west or the east, right. So around 1 year later, the narrator once again goes back to his old apartment to meet the porter. He he thought that he'll go and play a game of chess with him, but then the narrator is shocked, to find that he has left the place and some other person now is working as the apartment porter. Section 11 comes to an end here, and also the story comes to an end here. So basically I discussed the entire story section by section. As we all know, there were 11 sections, and I discussed the major ideas of the story, the major plot of the story. So here I come to an end of this first part of the story, The Quarter. I will discuss certain themes in the next part, and I will also discuss more ideas about the title of the story, the title of the collection, right, that is East West. This story is, The Quarter is set in this collection of short stories titled East West, right. And also in this summary, in this first lecture, I also discussed some of these themes in a brief manner, of course, to which, and I'll elaborate them in the subsequent lectures for sure. And then in the next part, I will also discuss the character analysis of Certainly Mary and Mixed Up Porter, and how their relationship, it's an important element in this story. And then I'll also be discussing Rushdie's experiments with language. So these are some of the what you can say elements that I'll be discussing in the subsequent parts. So please stay tuned. I'll see you shortly in the next part. I thank you all for being with me in this lecture. Thank you and goodbye.